We are going to talk about Rome, a museological project and a very long research lasted 2 years that in the end culminated in a final exhibition. This project demonstrates how a museum, and in particular a museum of the city, can be a useful instrument to understand the contemporary society and sometimes even to affect a community, in this case promoting an inclusive citizenship, peaceful coexistence, fighting stereotypes, and promoting social change. Why the Museum of Rome? The project Rome was born within and for the Museum of Rome. It's a very traditional museum. It's located in this beautiful historical building located in the very center of Rome, in one of the most popular square of the city, Piazza Navona. I think everyone knows it. The museum was opened in the first decade of the 20th century with the goal to preserve the memory of places in Rome that were disappearing or had been transformed because of the first urban town planning after the unification of the country, of Italy, and then after the intervention of the fascism, the fascist era. The element that has always inspired and represented the museum is the emotional memory of the city. This is very important. As the name of the museum calls, the Museum of Rome is a very pregnant name. It is supposed to be the museum of the whole city. And we know that a museum nowadays is called to take an active role in the present day, of course, with the continuity with its past. So at that time, it was 2013, I worked at the museum as a freelance, and I proposed to the former director of the museum to give birth to an experiment, a kind of a revolutionary project for the time, flanking the traditional practices of the museum and promoting for the first time an inclusive citizenship within the museum. At that time, the director answered me, okay, we have no money, but if you want, I trust you, so feel free. And the project started. So I accepted the challenge, and from that moment on, everybody had worked at the project on a voluntary basis. So we decided to listen and to give a say to the Rome's new citizens, migrants coming from all over the world who make up the structural material of the country. Due to many different reasons, in more than a century, you know that from a country of emigration, Italy turned to a country of immigration, but this has not yet had a proper fallout in terms of integration. And we can touch it, unlucky, in this present day with our brand new racist government. Here are some data about the population of foreign residents in Rome and the increasing number through years in Rome and in Italy. So we decided to involve a group of migrants to include their viewpoints about the reflection on the memory of the city. The final group was made by 34 people, persons, not only belonging to these 14 most popular foreign communities present in Rome, but from other countries too. Since immigration in contemporary cities is a multifaceted, a very complex reality, as Maro very clean explained before lunch, and also Peter after lunch and the last relationship, in order to embrace the complexity of diversity, we decided to involve very different people as regards origins, languages, religious status, causes of migrations, and so on. As the curator of the entire project, I met and interviewed each of them individually by doing very long interviews, like conversations, very informal conversation, to make them feel at ease and to freely express themselves. The questions of the interviews dealt with their personal relation with Rome, with the city, their memories, their feelings of attachment or disaffections for the city. And at the end of the conversation, all of them were asked the same question. Where is the place in Rome that you would never forget, somewhere you would always take with you, even if you went back to your own country, or if you moved somewhere else? This was a very important question. It was not the usual question, which is your favorite place in Rome, because it's more pregnant. And this question became the focus from which the second part of the project developed. So I asked each person to confide and express his or her choice of the place, not only with words, but also with a photographic image. So 12 photographers, Italian photographers, both students and teachers from a very important photographic organization in Rome, Officine Fotografiche. It's also a very important school of photography, accompanied each migrant to his or her significant location. So Italian photographers and migrants developed rich dialogues aimed at understanding the reason behind choosing the location. They discussed the structure and the best frame of the image in order to tell each participant's story in the best way possible. By doing so, each photographer became the eye of their partner, allowing them to become the director of the picture, like in a movie. In the same place, then, after a very long photographic session, the photographer took the portrait of the migrant. During other photographic sessions, during this phase of the project, all the migrants were invited to the museum to know the places where their photos would be exposed and to feel there like at home. It was very important for us, and also to meet the other participants and, of course, to meet the staff of the museum itself. For some of them, it was the first time in a museum, so we arranged for them a guided tour. It was a very important opportunity for dialogue, for interchange and networking for all of us. So migrants, photographers, curators, the museum staff, the researchers of the National Council of Research in Italy, all of us participated in this very important sharing experience. Here are some examples of the chosen places. The places are very, very different one each other. For instance, this is the Termini station, so a very common place for all of us, but very important for them. Some places are very monumental, recognizable. They are like common places because we are in Rome. It's a very touristic and famous city. Others choose an intimate place like the private home, places related with personal records. I think that 2 catalogs of the exhibition are passing, so you can read the stories. Or the hospital where a baby was born, and so on, the school of the children of Askalu, a woman from Eritrea. And also a place related with some nightmare. So that was because the importance of the question that was not your favorite location, because it was a more open question. This was the first exhibition we made at the Museum of Rome in Palazzo Braschi. Just the pictures, portraits and places, together with the stories of the migrants, were exposed, together with some panels made by the researcher of the CNR in Rome, explaining people in a very easy way data about migrations. A video with the stories of voices of the migrants in their original language was available. The visitors could post their ideas in the same places and answering the same questions, activities with the school. We think that Rome was a very successful initiative, because I can confirm that we achieved the goals. First of all, we contrasted stereotypes focusing on the migrants as a person and not numbers, involving migrants as creative protagonists and allowing them to have an active role in the process of their own integration. And we stimulated a redefinition of urban places among the participants, stimulating critical awareness, relationship with the territory, and of course sense of place and identity and proudness for them. And on the other side, we created a new emotional geography of the city that affected all of us, from the migrants to the curators to the public of the exhibition. Now, for the last minutes, I give the word to Gloria.
Yes, very quickly, because I know that you are all waiting for the coffee break and that we are late. So, Claudia has just presented you the exhibition project from the very beginning, from the idea, from the first idea, through the development of the project until the end, the goals and the display of this exposition. But from the very beginning, also, we tried to figure out if it was possible to have an evaluation study to really understand if the goals and the result that with this exhibition we are trying to have are really achieved. And as we know, one of the most pressing concerns in contemporary museum study is that of assessing the audience. And even more in a project like that, because we have to say that this is one of the few, as far as I know, participatory museum projects in Italy, and for sure the only one who took place in the Museum of Rome. So, in this context, which are the effects for the visitors, for both the participants in the project and for the visitors themselves who visit the exposition in the museum during the display? And what are the consequences, if we are able to think about some consequences in the museum itself, in its mission, in the redefinition of the mission of the value of the museum, for example? And in order to answer this kind of question, we try to build what we call the evaluation study. I'm a researcher, I'm in sociology of culture, and I'm specialized in visitor studies. And what we try to do is studies based on the visitor books, which is something that you all as a museum worker are used to see, but you know also that it's very, very hard to work with, because it is a very challenging instrument. It's a very difficult tool to understand and to really take profit of it in order to understand exactly what happened in a book like that. Why? Because the comments that are written in this book, first of all, are individual, which means that people who are writing there are writing for themselves and not in a more complex research project. The researchers have no control about the data that are being produced in the visitor book. This is a reason why it is so difficult to understand and to give a reading of this, an interpretation of this data. Then we have to say that we collected above more than 2,000 comments, phrases, large part of discourses. It's a big book, actually. And I have to say also that we do not take into account, for example, just the signature or other comments that are also present in the books, not for the study at least, but at the end we ended with a big database, an Excel database with lots of variables and comments. And the real work was about try to categorize all the theme or the thematic according to the theoretical framework we established before, and really try to understand exactly what is going on. As I said, working with a visitor book is very, very difficult. It's an hard question, but it is also something very, very, how can I say, it's very important because it's there that are collected all the impression, all the emotion, all the real effects on visitors. And just have a look very quickly at the results. For today, we try to understand just 3 of the categorization that we choose and to understand exactly the consequence and the effects on visitor and on the participants, which are the emotional approach. We are all aware of the importance of emotional learning above all in a museum and above all in a participatory project like this. So the words that were coming out more frequently are more words that deals with the inner, the deeper emotional side of every individual participant or visitor in this project. They were moved, they were touched, they were shocked for the experience itself. And the second point is the civic engagement, which deals with the value of the museum itself. What does it mean, an exhibition about immigrants, migrants, about all the racial contexts that, of course, are always present in this kind of discourses. It is nice, just one for the record, it is nice to see immigrants in a good light. This could be a very controversial interpretation for this kind of phrases, but this is exactly what we want to accept the challenge, to have an idea of what we could happen during this kind of exposition. And the last one, it's about the cultural heritage. A lot of the pictures that have been taken during the photographic session for the exhibition are portraits of the cultural heritage of Rome. We are in Rome, at least. The Colosseum, Piazza del Popolo, Piazza Navona, and a lot of other very, very common and traditional places. What happened in a museum of Rome, in a city museum, when these kind of places are redefined with different meanings in such a process? What does it mean? The comment that we collected are stating that all the visitors reacted positively to this kind of re-elaboration of our cultural heritage. They give us something, they enrich the experience. They recognize that migrants can bring us something new, something positive, something unexpected. The value of the surprise is also very, very present in these comments. So as just to conclude, the next steps. Of course, as a researcher, it is always interesting to try to understand exactly if the research we are doing will have a consequence, will have consequences in the theoretical approach. So, for example, the question is, what's happened 4 years after for the participants? And the follow-up that we are trying to understand if it's possible to arrange is build another research project and try to understand what are the consequences for the visitant and for the participants of the project. If they are cultural consumer, thank you, have changed, or if they are involved in other projects, or what are the consequences in the networking within the city after this experience in a museum. And of course, a comparative perspective. I was talking with some of you before about the possibility to compare the results of this experience. What if this kind of project will take place in another city? Will we have different results? Will we have different response among the participants? Or what about the visitor books? What will be the emotion? Peter before said something about the differences, the different kind of narrative that could happen really. So we are wondering if this kind of project will take place, for example, in New York or in Rotterdam, what will happen? So up to you. Thank you.